And I'm sure that there will be plenty of people on the American left who will say, why Chinese government, communist government running over citizens with tanks is no different than what's happening to protesters in American cities. Well, I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I think there is very little comparison. But I thought I'd check this with somebody who knows better than I do, and that's Olivia Enos, who is a senior policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, specifically on Asian studies. Olivia, good to have you back on the program.
Thank you for having me back again, Lars.
This was a real challenge, and I remember it as a young reporter, 31 years ago, when the Chinese government decided that they had to shut down the protests that were going on, and they literally went out and they hurt a lot. They killed a lot of people in their own country to try to shut those protests down. So I'd like to get your take on that, and also about the future of Hong Kong and perhaps even Taiwan as we head forward with the new stance of the Chinese Communist government toward Hong Kong and what I think will be their new stance against Taiwan. But let's start with Tiananmen Square first and remind my audience the history of that event.
Absolutely. Well, I think, etched in our minds is that picture of a single Chinese man standing down, at least 4, if not more, Chinese Communist Party tanks at Tiananmen Square. And this happened on June 5th, but of course it came in the midst of those overarching Tiananmen Square protests where the Chinese people were coming out and saying, we want democracy, we want freedom, and the Chinese Communist Party was having none of it. Of course, we all know that actually resulted in a massacre of hundreds to possibly thousands of individuals. And the Tiananmen Square massacre is this vivid incident that we all remember. But the thing that we have to keep in mind is that the Chinese Communist Party has taken millions of lives, millions, due to its poor tactics, due to its values. And the Chinese Communist Party, it just really reveals the vulnerability of the CCP, that a single individual, that individuals raising their voices in defense of freedom and liberty pose that big of a threat that they feel like they have to end their lives. And I think, as you alluded to, this particular anniversary of Tiananmen Square is incredibly ominous given the questionable future for the people of Hong Kong. And happy to get into that more in detail.
Well, let's do that, because do you think there is any legitimate parallel to what's going on in American cities now? Because unlike China, people here have a constitutional right to protest, to the point where cities and to some extent states have bent over backwards to say, we'll let you protest. But protest is one thing. Peaceably assemble, as the Constitution says. Breaking and burning and attacking citizens and attacking cops is something entirely different. This isn't a man standing in front of a tank. This is people, some of whom have deliberately provoked confrontations with the cops and have attacked the police in some cases. And we're now seeing, just in the last 7 days, what appears to be 7 deliberate shootings of cops all over America in what appear to be targeted attacks on the government, a government that does run a representative government, where people do have a vote, where they do have representatives, where they can petition their government for redress of grievances entirely differently. But is there any legitimate comparison between what happened 31 years ago and what's happening on the streets of American cities today?
Well, Lars, I think it's really important that you pointed out that in America, we enjoy the right to protest, that we have the ability to raise our voices and to be heard. And not only through protesting, but we have the ability to communicate, through a vote, what our desires are for our future leaders. We have access to immense ways to express our displeasure through civil society that operates largely unrestricted by the U.S. government. And of course, we have other methods by which we can get our information out, like radio shows like the one that I'm on today. And I think that that's so important to highlight, because ordinary people in China don't experience that today, despite the fact that the Chinese government is, in fact, a signatory to the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which is supposed to guarantee an individual's right to protest, their freedom of speech, their freedom of association, and yet the Chinese Communist Party constantly flies in the face of that. And I think it's so important to keep that in context. And of course, we saw Hong Kong protesters taking to the streets last year to the tune of millions of people. And the reason why we see the Chinese Communist Party responding so very strongly with this new proposed national security law that effectively ends the one country, two systems that has preserved freedom in Hong Kong is because the Chinese Communist Party views individual practice of freedom and liberty, like protesting, as a fundamental threat to itself. And I think that at the end of the day, reveals the vulnerability of the Chinese Communist Party, reveals the vulnerabilities of China. And so I would say that all of the actions that you're seeing in the context of Hong Kong and, of course, what we bore witness to on June 4th, 1989, was as a result of the Chinese Communist Party's weakness, not its strength.
Absolutely, because, I mean, if people in this country do not appreciate their freedoms, just imagine if you told somebody, you don't think much of your free speech freedoms. I mean, I have a First Amendment Friday every Friday, have for the last 25 years, because I want to remind people they have the right to speak out, and I give them the forum to do it. And they can get on my program and criticize the government or private companies or anything they want to criticize, and the government doesn't control it. I'm the only guy who does control it, and I like it when people call in and have a legitimate grievance on something, and they want to air it here on this program. But the fact that the very powerful Chinese Communist government, even back then, saw free speech freely exercised as a literal threat to the existence of the Chinese Communist government should tell you how valuable that one right that so few people use very much at all. I mean, most Americans are happy to just kind of go along and get along, and they don't usually speak up publicly about whatever their grievance is. But they have the right to do it. And when they do it, like I said, there are cities now that seem willing to sacrifice big chunks of their downtown to some really violent activity and even put the lives of police officers at risk to make sure that they bend over backwards so that everybody gets their say said. The problem is, as I said, the Constitution guarantees peaceable assembly. It doesn't guarantee rioting and looting.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember that freedom is so worth fighting for, and that it's not free. That it's something that we have to consistently be advocating for, and that there are various methods through which Americans have the ability to do it. And I think that really does set us in contrast to China. It has been amazing to watch, social media and how people are taking to social media, how people are expressing their voices, a lot of them in peaceful ways. And of course, there are definitely concerning incidents that we have to watch carefully for. And safeguarding freedom doesn't mean safeguarding the right to do anything. We have to be responsible and be really, really good stewards of the liberty that we are given, because at the end of the day, we have to both preserve our own liberty, but also preserve the liberty and the lives of others.